All right, here we are at the very end. We are going to start on chapter 29, hit chapter 30, and conclude on chapter 31. This will be the most letters we have read, although I will say that at least the last one's a little bit shorter, but they're all worth spending time on. So, you know, this is, if you patiently walk through the book, you know, a week or so at a time, then you kind of see it starting to take shape and then concluding. But if you've already read through it and then you're just kind of rereading to go with us class by class, then it's almost like working backwards. So, but we're at the point where no one should be spoiled at anything. And because we're taking the last three together, I want to take a minute and go to the conclusion and then let us work backwards with these last couple of chapters, because we're not leading into any kind of surprises. The book concludes because of something that happens. What happens to conclude the book? Like, what's the event?
Well, the patient dies.
The patient dies. The man is killed in a bombing. So this bombing that we've been kind of warned about, this is the London Blitz. And if you remember, we've had a couple of letters that have said, you know, this man has been informed that his area is a likely target, stoke his anxiety. And then in one of these earlier chapters, they have a night or more of bombings that he survives, and that does not destroy where he was staying or living or whatever it was. But at some point in between the letters 30 and 31, during a bombing, he is killed. Now, why do I say it's during a bombing, as opposed to he's injured and it occurs later? You recall?
It was quick.
It was quick, basically, and we can spend some time on that when we get there. But the pain and the fear is instantly transformed, and he is beyond it. And Wormwood is sort of blown away, blown apart in the moment of temptation to instantly losing him, losing his grasp, and then being confronted with angelic beings and even the presence of God. So the book concludes because Wormwood loses, and he doesn't lose in the sense of the man recommits his faith and then, you know, temptation isn't going to be successful for the next 30, 40 years. What we might consider in a state of grace. This man is killed and his fate is sealed. It is sealed into the heavenly courts and written in the book of the Lamb. And Wormwood will no longer have the chance to tempt this guy. As a matter of fact, there are consequences to this. What are the consequences to Wormwood? That is the motto of hell, is eat or be eaten. So what's going to happen now? Wormwood's going to get eaten, and it sounds like Screwtape's going to get a big juicy piece. And so from the beginning, remember, I've been trying to underscore the fact, without giving away too much, that there are no friends in hell. There's no allies in hell. You know, there are, you know, maybe temporary alliances. There are, you know, you work with these other tempters or these other demons. They are not your friends. And even the family relationship between Uncle Screwtape and nephew Wormwood is always secondary to the fact that the calculus of hell, and this has been explained in a couple of different letters, the calculus of hell is, I am me. And in this spot in which I exist, it is only me. And if you are there, that means I am here. If you want to be here, only one of us can be here at any given time. You will have to absorb me, or I will have to absorb you. And this absorption is like consuming. So, what is a fate worse than death? Maybe this is it. I'm not sure exactly what this is going to look like, but it's, you know, you either bring the food or you are the food. He states that almost verbatim. So you show up with the party without your bag of Doritos, you're the Dorito. And that will be the ultimate fate of Wormwood. And this loving uncle, this affectionate uncle, we now see what that sort of love means. He loves Wormwood in the same way that I love pizza. He's willing to help as long as it serves his purposes, but as soon as it doesn't, not only will he hang his nephew out to dry, he will greedily consume him to his destruction. All right, so let's work backwards then. So that particular dramatic climax or that conclusion, we're now on the same page with. We go back to 29, and we're moving towards this climax that Wormwood is very excited that the patient is agitated because the Germans are going to be bombing again. And what Screwtape kind of has sort of a regular rejoinder to this excitement. What is it? This happened a couple of times. He's very, Wormwood gets very excited about the prospects of war. And Screwtape is,
Doesn't get excited about it.
yeah, humans in their war, yeah, whatever. Sure, we can use it to our purposes, but we've got some stuff to work on with this. It's not just enough to give him anxiety. Anxiety is kind of fun. We've had moments of the fear and anxiety before, and I think we've discussed it as almost being like candy to the demons. It may taste sweet to them, but it's empty calories. And it can actually kind of make you sick. They are looking for a corruption that is full and complete and can be drained for a long, nourishing time, not just the quick hit of a sugar rush. So he's scared of the Germans and he's worried about death. Okay, that's a sugar rush to the demons. That's not really what you want. So we have a nice kind of laying out of, in 29, virtues.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that he talked about corruption is no good without some virtue.
That's right. Now, why would that be? Corruption is no good unless there's a virtue to corrupt, which hell cannot create any virtues. They've been trying for years. And I know we're going to get it any minute now, but because remember, evil can't create. Evil can only corrupt. Evil can only break. Evil can only make something worse. It can't make something at all. It can only take what's already there and mess it up. It cannot actually create. So why does hell want virtue? You would think that's antithetical.
It enables the corrupted one to do more.
Right. The simple corruptions, again, I think are like junk food. But if they want really bad.
What would Attila the Hun have been without courage to go?
Right. That's right. So if you come up with some truly villainous figure from history, there is going to be a connection to some sort of virtue that was corrupted. Now, these days it's very unpopular and can get you canceled online to talk about something that could be construed as positive towards a bad person. Like, oh, you said something good about them. That must mean you like them, and that means you are them. And but the idea is we wouldn't ever hear about any of these huge, terrible historical villains unless there was some kind of greatness about them. And that greatness is what allows their corruption to become noteworthy. We don't remember the names of pickpockets. we don't remember the names of murderers, which is also a sin. Muttering, rah, 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 rah. That gets the Israelites in trouble in the wilderness. You know, when we talk about the nature of sin, the murderer is as culpable as the murderer, and each separate us from the fellowship of God. However, though their eternal consequences are similar, their temporal consequences are very different. Both of them fall short of the glory of God, murdering and muttering. One of them has a lot greater consequences in the here and the now. When you mutter, maybe nobody else hears you. When you mutter, maybe you just annoy or frustrate other people. When you mutter, maybe you hurt feelings or damage relationships. When you murder, you remove someone from life. You change their family forever. You go to jail for decades. The temporal consequences can be radically different, even though the eternal consequences are all roughly the same. So muttering is a sin. Yeah.
Mutter fodder here.
Nope.
Yeah.
I am making kind of the homonym pun of muttering and murdering, that all sins separate us from the fellowship of God. But the temporal, earthly, mortal consequences of various sins can be very different. This is where we're getting into the virtues. The demons really want us to have virtue, not because they like our virtue, they just like what they can do with it. Imagine virtue as the clay in which they can mold into ways that make us far worse. Imagine virtue as the tools. And if you're going to do a project, you want lots of useful tools in your tool bag, in your toolbox. You don't want to have one thing, because depending on the project, you may need something else. But the more tools you have, the more things you can do with them. The hammer can be used to frame a house, to make a picture. The hammer can be used to hit somebody over the head and brain them. This is the tools themselves and the power of the tools. Dynamite can be used to excavate from a mountain, so a road can be built through and medicine can be transported more efficiently to those in need, and dynamite can be used to blow up a building and kill people inside. So remember that before there was a Nobel Peace Prize, there was an Alfred Nobel who invented TNT. And the Nobel Peace Prize is really kind of an act of contrition for what his invention, which he thought was going to be constructive, he started to worry about how destructive it had become. All of the uses that had become very dangerous. And so in order to kind of counterbalance, he thought, well, I want to use what I've been given to start promoting, science and peace and stuff like that. So again, you don't make demons from fallen people, you make demons from fallen angels. The spiritual power of an angel corrupted is what makes this malignant, malicious spiritual entity. We don't remember the names of pickpockets. We do remember the names of mass murderers. There's something about, and again, risking the scorn of others who are going to say, oh, you should find nothing that's positive about such a terrible person. But think about any historical villain that you want, and then we can connect some kind of potentially positive virtue that was used in a corrupted way. And the example of Attila the Hun, where would Attila the Hun be without his courage? That boldness to go and conquer. And terrible things happened, and you know, tens of thousands of people killed and murdered and swaths of area conquered. That's using the boldness and the courage in the wrong way. But if he was kind of a timid, mousy person of a temperament, we would have never remembered his name because he never would have done those things. Perhaps if that same courage and boldness had been used differently, he would still be remembered, but for positive achievements or whatever. But these are the virtues as tools the demons would love to use. They know they can't create them, but they want them in us so they can be corrupted. And the bigger the virtue, the bigger the opportunity for the destruction, the destructive capability, let's say.
So you're saying that people that we assume to be saints struggle more than most of us do.
That is quite possible. Struggle. That is quite possible. When you, for instance, read the spiritual writings of some saints, they often speak about their own sense of difficulty or unworthiness or their struggle. You know, the phrase "the dark night of the soul" was not coined by a terrible person. It was coined by a deeply faithful author who this was a sense of, you know, saintliness and sin. One of the illustrations that I've used in the past is, and the ladies may have more experience with this than the guys do, but a makeup mirror. Makeup mirrors, are they convex or concave? I forget. But whatever they do, they magnify. They magnify. And you know, again, I mean, I've been around them because I've got ladies in my household, but it's one of those things like if you look at it, oh, like, wow, you know, I don't look so great close up. Like I can see every pore, that, you know, that kind of thing. The closer within this mortal life we draw to the light of Christ, it is very common that light exposes more about us. There is in mathematical terms, almost an asymptote towards the presence of Christ within this mortal life. So an asymptote is a curve that it approaches a limit without ever reaching it. So it's like that curve, like a straight line, the curved line that kind of goes. So the closer you get, imagine I'm going to walk from here to the door in increments of halfway. So, you know, every minute I'm going to walk halfway from here to the door. I will never reach the door because halfway is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. The closer and closer and closer in this mortal life we get to the presence and the light of Christ, the more we are, the more we see.
Just like Paul did.
Paul talks about being the chief of sinners. So, and you, whether it's a saintly person you know in your life or reading some of the spiritual autobiographies of the saints, you will see a sense of, you know, their own struggle. You know, you would think these people are terrible the way they talk about it. There was, you know, when the letters, which I think they should have probably stayed private or been destroyed, of Mother Teresa were released maybe 10, 15 years ago, it hit the news as though it were some scandal. She talks about how she can't feel the presence of Christ and he feels so far away from her. See, it was a scam all along. And I'm like, well, you guys just don't understand sainthood. Like, you don't understand virtue. That level of confession does not make me think less of her. It affirms what I believed of her and of her humility. It is in your humility that you struggle more with your unworthiness. So the short answer is yes, but I think it also, the added dimension is not just think about the potentially good qualities of terrible historical people. Think about people that have been in the spotlight as being really good. And when they fall, the sort of fallout it comes, the consequences that it comes with that.
Not any specific one, but presidents, for example.
You know, a politician who falls from grace, an actor who does something terrible. you know, TV evangelists or celebrity preachers, when they fall, there is a blast radius to that, which makes an enormous, enormous difference. I don't like speaking ill of colleagues. I've kind of developed a shorthand to say something along the line. If I ever tell you that so-and-so is not a good guy, that's about as bad as it's going to get. Mainly because there's certain, you know, like maybe I found out something in a way that is not supposed to be public, or it has to be private. If I say so-and-so is not a good guy, that's like the biggest flashing light I'm going to give you. And the concept of goodness, when we start talking about, again, let's say a clergy colleague, right? This is something that I try to be as introspective as I can be. I want goodness to not be about my skill. I want goodness to be about my moral quality. Someone can be a boring preacher, a middling manager, a, you know, kind of a goofy presence, but be righteous, morally upright, kind, merciful, with a servant's heart. And I want to say that that priest is good. Now, that's not to say that I don't think we should develop skills we're deficient in, and, you know, whether it's, you know, preaching or being an administrator, or, you know, your interactions personally with people, whatever. But it is to say, it becomes very easy for us to talk about goodness with very surface qualities, that especially with somebody like a priest, a pastor, a preacher, whatever. Oh, so-and-so is so good. And then you find out that they're like one-on-one, they're actually really horrible. And think about how much damage that does. You know, when a celebrity preacher has the latest affair revealed, I mean, that breaks hearts all over. I've had a string of preachers, pastors, and authors that I have looked up to in my own Christian and pastoral formation, that over the past decade have done, you know, it's been revealed that they've done some truly despicable things. And every single one of them just feels like a punch in the gut. And so this is what the demons love, because they see nothing but fuel for the fire, to find a great person who they can use that quality of such potential power and strength and use it for wrong. Not only for that person's corruption, but think about how much damage we can cause in other people. So in specific to this patient and this time, there is a virtue of courage as opposed to cowardice at one level that is being compared. Now, what is useful from the demon's perspective about cowardice? Manipulative, okay. People or the demons? The demons want to be liked, okay? And so fit cowardice into that.
A real person.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, bravery is not the lack of fear, it's acting in spite
Aha.
of fear. If you're not afraid. then-
Right. Yeah, sure. Stupid people lack fear. So bravery and courage is really like you said, it's not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to continue despite it. And that's going to be a huge point within talking about like, this guy is scared of dying. This guy is scared of the bombs falling. This guy is scared of getting hurt. He's scared of this woman that he loves and her family getting hurt. And it's the Germans' fault. They are doing this to us. And so we have this whole chapter, 2 chapters really, of trying to stoke that, but in a very particular way. It's not enough for him to be fearful. He's like, yeah, I get it. You like You like tasting his fear. But you are the fool if you leave it at that. You need to do something productive with this fear. And just making him a coward is trickier than you think. Cowardice that remains internal can be basically overcome if he does his duty. He can be as scared out of his mind as he can be, but if he still does what he is supposed to do, if he's still willing to step forward and care for people, to be in a line of fire, whatever it is, then the fear that you're drinking like Coke it's going to get cut off, because it's actually going to work against you and draw him closer to God. Because the fear itself is like temptation. Temptation is not sinful. It's what we do with it.
Hatred into it.
Working hatred, he said, is a productive thing to do. Make him hate the Germans. And if he will not hate them on account of himself, see if you can get him to hate them on account of the other people. Like, whatever happens to me, but how dare they threaten women and children? It is very easy to hate abstractions. It is more difficult to hate real people. That's not to say we can't.
To hate attractions? What did you say?
Abstractions. It's very easy to hate something abstract, like Germans who are bombing us. But like the pilot in the plane looking in his eyes and saying, "You're the guy that I'm going to throttle for this," is different. It's not to say we can't hate real people. We can. But it's very, very easy to tip us over into hating abstractions. And the thing about abstractions, as soon as you can keep somebody in the abstract, you have dehumanized them, which can also lead to all sorts of other nasty things that the demons are going to enjoy. He brings up, and this is a Lewisism, but he brings it up in context here, and it's 100% worth not just kind of talking about, but sort of applying and remembering. Courage, or in the classical Christian sense, fortitude, is not so much a virtue in and of itself. It is every virtue at the point of its testing.
Every virtue and its testing?
Yes, at the point of its testing. So think of any of the classical Christian virtues, the temperance and chastity,
honesty.
And then think of any like contemporary virtues, however we would describe them. Pick honest. So let's say honesty. It is easy to be honest when you have nothing at stake. But when your honesty might cost you money, cost you a relationship, cost you a position, cost you pain, cost you awkwardness or whatever, then suddenly there's a question: will you be honest or not? When there's a cost to being honest and you are honest, that's real honesty. Are you an honest person can only really be answered at the point of testing. Otherwise, you're assuming. Maybe it's true, but maybe it's not. And we can think that in just very, very plain physical terms, like, oh, I'm strong. Okay. But can you lift that? Sure, I can. I'm strong. Well, you don't know that until you actually lift it and you're successful or not. So if you do lift it, okay, you are strong. But if you don't, well, I guess you weren't as strong as you thought you were. So for courage or fortitude to be any virtue at the point of its testing is to say, like the fear and the bravery is not the lack of fear. It's to say each of these virtues that we might have thought we had or try to develop or we aspire to, you don't really know its quality until the point of it being challenged. And that's the real issue here. When the bombs start dropping, what are you going to do? When the going gets tough, what are you going to do? When it hits the fan, what are you going to do? And lots of people talk a good game, and maybe even they believe it. But do you really know until it's tested? So this courage, which even Wormwood is kind of guessing at, might pop up in ways he doesn't expect. Because remember, these virtues are not granted by hell. Hell can only corrupt them. They're each granted by God. And that's the warning. Like, you want to test them so they break, but be prepared to the risk. The risk is testing a virtue, and him passing. You know what that's going to do? That's just going to take him closer to God. And if you make him aware of it, that also might help him realize that he's agitated, he's scared, these things are happening, and you're recording what he did. Oh, he forgot to say a prayer. Oh, he snapped at someone. Oh, he kicked a dog that was in his, whatever. Like, these little minor things, and you are missing the big picture here, that when push came to shove, this guy actually stood strong and tall. You are in a really bad position here, Wormwood.
That's sure there's no, there's statistics. I can bet these guys maybe in a different computer range. We talk 92.5%, Wormwood, whichever, the guy's gonna fall. Or, that for the majority, I bet the test is fail.
And that's
So they may know the statistical chance that this guy's gonna fail too.
maybe so.
I'm just making
Because,
up,
well,
because they've seen it before.
Screwtape has all of this experience that Wormwood doesn't, and he's warning him. They clearly see us as, little more than chimps and gorillas that God loves for some indiscernible, nonsensical reason, if not for subterfuge, for some nefarious purpose, because they just can't understand it. But I think we still surprise them in ways they don't understand. Because they are by nature so utterly self-centered, they don't really understand firsthand the positive use of a vice. I mean, they can observe us doing it, and they know it's risks to them. But why we would ever do it in the first place? Why would you be chaste when you can enjoy pleasure? Why would you be brave when you can be safe? Why would you be temperate when you can go off the deep end and enjoy it? So all of these things,
they're aware of, although they work in an anti-tin community as well.
right? But again,
So the YB, they come down to, most of mankind really goes for, I'm not gonna be changed.
right, their ability to observe,
They know we're born that.
but again, knowing something and experiencing something are not always the same thing. So,
but they've seen a lot of mankind uphill to that point.
absolutely, and their ability to observe is enormous. It's way beyond ours because they can see things that we don't. But I think there is this capacity to be surprised, because as much as they've watched us, they still don't understand us.
Right.
Same thing with God. They know all sorts of stuff about God, but they do not know him. Even the demons believe and shudder. So these are still mysteries to them that they're trying to fill the gaps in through their raw observation. But I think they don't really know how any of us are going to perform at crunch time. And so there's a risk to them. Something really good can happen when you push a human to their breaking point, as far as a demon is concerned. But every now and again, one of them is going to find in that breaking point some glorious grace and a virtuous stand that's going to ruin everything the demons have been trying to do.
Is there anywhere in here that speaks to the fact that they're getting the majority of us?
I mean, just offhanded comments about a pretty kettle of such and such, or this and that, or,
I think all of us, like, they're not satisfied.
no, and they're never satisfied.
They want 98%, not 98, want 99, whatever. it is.
Right. There's a limitless, ravenous appetite, in a very real sense, both the theoretical, like metaphorical sense of an appetite. But remember, what's going to happen to Wormwood? He's eaten. He's eaten. So there is a real appetite to this. They wish to consume you. What does that look like? I don't know exactly, but it sounds horrible. And this is a limitless, bottomless appetite. You know, we've talked about the physical appetites in a few other letters, about those urges that, you know, like I'm hungry and so I eat. Imagine not being constrained by physicality, but still having an appetite.
And never been satisfied.
You know, well, I mean, that's what it would result in. Because if you have a sensation of hunger, but no physical body to satisfy or to feel full, you'll just keep cramming it down, cramming it down, cramming it down. And this is this limitless. There's a, you know, the description gnawing is occasionally attributed to hell or to the demonic. And that's what I get out of this. When you think of gnawing, it's like, it's almost like, you know, just chewing on a bone that's long since gone with the meat, like a dog would do. Like what are you possibly getting out of that? You've eaten every scrap a year ago, but there's still, and so this is an unsatisfiable hunger that if they can't get us, they will absolutely get each other. It's one of the fun little scenes on the in the Lord of the Rings, where the two hobbits who are companions to Frodo carrying the ring are captured. Not Frodo in the ring, but his two companions are captured, and the orcs, these bad creatures are taking them back to their master, but they're told, you cannot despoil them. But they're, you know, these things are ravenous and they're hungry. Like, how about his legs? He doesn't need his legs. We can eat his legs. And then eventually, and he's told no by the head orc. But when the head orc isn't looking, he goes to try to snatch a little bite. And in the movie, the version goes, and the head orc just turns around and cuts that orc's head right off. And he tells the other orcs, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. And they all jump on the now deceased orc and eat him up. No, I mean,
I'm testing your knowledge.
it is, the scene is in the book, but not the meats on the menu. That was actually ad-libbed at the time. But you know, that sense of what they really want is us, but they're more than happy to eat each other. And that's the kind of hunger we're talking about. So here we are with this patient with what you would think to be a truly terrible circumstance. There is a feeling of dread in the pit of your stomach when the Category 5 hurricane is pointed right at you. I cannot imagine living through the Blitz, knowing destruction is coming tonight, but having no idea and zero control whether it will be the house across the street or whether it will be yours. My New Testament professor at seminary lived through the Blitz as a very young boy.
In Germany.
In England. And I can't really conceive of night after night after night after night. And how the people just didn't break. Because that's what it was. Ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish in the Blitz? You're not really trying to destroy their homes and factories. You're trying to break their spirits.
Well, and you know people did it, because even soldiers did it.
Oh, absolutely.
You're gonna get stories, and it's sad, it's some.
It absolutely, I mean, individually, but you know, this was, how long did it lasted for weeks, right? I cannot fathom just the accumulated toll, not just the night of terror, but then basically like picking up stuff the next day, knowing it's likely to happen all over again tonight, and it's never going to stop. And so there is a connection to writing the demonic that maybe people who have experienced these hells on earth are able to convey a little with a little more sharpness. And remember that Lewis fought in the trenches of World War I. And if we can make a list of times where there was hell on earth, that's one of them.
Uncle who, the story is alcohol, use alcohol.
So these are moments of amazing, incredible desperation. And how is this guy going to respond? Wormwood thinks this is easy street, and each of these letters is coming back with, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know, why is this not working? But each time this guy has been pressed with the extraordinary, he has responded positively. And the little failings have been there, they've not been capitalized on, and ultimately what he has received in this time of great fear has been even greater grace. So here's the thing about virtues. The truly virtuous person doesn't so much feel proud for their virtues as they feel grateful. For if they are given, granted, and gifted, then we have no say over, kind of like where you were born. You had nothing to do with that. Who your parents were, nothing to do with that. These are, all good gifts come from the Father of lights. Even the virtue within this guy, even the ability to weather the storm of these bombs and the destruction and whatever. I mean, I think about, pictures of folks like just picking through the debris the next day. And this is like, what are you going to do?
Well, they could have just sat and done nothing.
We had this was was it 2004 when the four storms cut through Central Florida? After one of them, and I forget which one it was, might have been Charlie. So early on in the process, maybe not. Maybe it was Ivan or Gene. So what happened was, at least in the Orlando area, one of them dumped a ton of water. And then one of the following ones brought terrible wind. And there was a lot of old oaks that came down because of the combination of the two. The first storm softened the ground. The second storm took those big trees down. And so we had a bunch of stuff go down in my parents' neighborhood. And I'd come up, a day or two later with a chainsaw and stuff to help them out and to help clear stuff. And I mean, there's just debris everywhere. I mean, big giant oaks that have been there for decades. And the one part of the neighborhood, the roads were completely impassable because of all the trees down. And there's my dad in his front yard, and he's picking up leaves, picking them up by hand, one at a time.
Your dad's a doctor.
No.
Oh,
No. And with everything around, like it was a comical, but there was a sense of, well, what else are you going to do? I mean, you got to start somewhere. And he was not content to do nothing. He had to do something, but he couldn't, like they had no power. And like, what are you going to do with this 30-foot branch down? Nothing until people come and help comes and saws and everything else. So he was just going to pick up leaves. because that was Sunday. And I still remember him, picking up leaves after the storm. These moments, this testing of like your patience. Imagine how patient you have to be when you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, knowing, hearing they're flying above us. And are you going to hear the whistle of a bomb? And when you hear the whistle of a bomb, is it coming for you? It makes me twingy just to think about it. And so we've had these moments where he's been, cross at people. He's been scared. He's been angry. But all of them, for hell's point of view, have come to nothing. Because at each point, even in his human weakness, God has granted him grace. And he has embraced that grace. He has been grateful for that grace. And instead of this time of terror pulling him down into hell, it has been lifting him into heaven. And then we get to our last letter, as we've already said. And, I think based off of the description, I feel pretty confident that this was an instantaneous or near instantaneous death. He basically Screwtape laments, this should have come in a hospital bed. This should have come under doctor's care with feebleness and getting sicker and weaker all the time and all the sort of stuff that we can milk for all it's worth and the time and the energy to keep it going over the decades. And you've just seen it snatched away from you in a moment. Pain upon pain has been instantly wiped away. And we have, from the demonic point of view, this is looking from the outside in, but the beatific vision. That this guy has closed his eyes in death and opened them in the presence of God. A presence that is so forceful to them, it's sort of blasting them away and blinding them. Even the demons feel it. I'm reminded a little bit. Sometimes they've got these machines at like an amusement park, or I've even seen them at a mall. We did one at a little kind of theme park thing where you can get in like a sealed booth and experience various categories of hurricane winds. What does a category 1 feel like? Now, as a lifelong Floridian, I kind of know what all these feel like. But you're standing in this booth, like, for 15 seconds of 150-mile-an-hour winds, and just the raw power of that. So I kind of infer a little bit of this from their description, that in that moment, God, who has been present always, is made clear to the man, to the patient. And in that moment, that presence is also there for the demons, and it's kind of blowing them away. And there's also the neat little line in that moment. And Screwtape is like, you felt it, didn't you? The man saw you. He saw you. So in that moment of death, though we look through a mirror darkly, then we will see face to face. As I know, I will be fully known. That's all heavenly language. That is all a salvation hope. And for his eyes to be truly opened, and he can now see the corruption that's always been around him, tempting him. And in just that flash, that's also the moment where the demon loses his grip forever.
There's been something that I've
kept meaning, I think about it, but I'm reading, and when I get here, but I kept meaning to ask, how did Screwtape affect Wormwood? How did Wormwood affect this patient? How was he able, was the patient able to see him? Was he able to hear him?
Yeah.
Or how did he actually get him to do?
Yeah, so he leaves it kind of purposefully mysterious. There's no visible interaction that we're told of, although you know, they do make that reference about it, you know, it's like a first year demon school about appearing as an angel of light kind of stuff. But I think they've learned that the spectacular is less useful to them than the subtle. So when we kind of try to piece together how these interactions go, my guess is it is inaudible, invisible, nudges, prompts, and feelings. You ever felt a weird nudge to do something stupid or wrong? Like the idea kind of flashes in your mind, like, why do we think that? You know, is this a malign outside force? I'm not real big on spiritual warfare personally, only in the sense I'm not denying it. I'm just saying, personally, I am exceptionally well qualified to mess myself up. I don't need any outside help. I'm not saying there isn't outside help. I'm just saying I've got enough evidence of me making bad mistakes all on my lonesome. So the outside influence, and when we think about influences in our life, just using the term, oh, so-and-so is an influence. Like, let's think positively. If you can think about somebody who's been an influence on your life, well, they influenced me for years. Was it because they were next to you, whispering to you and pointing stuff out to you? Or was there something about them that made an impression on you that makes you think and you act in a way that even though they're not there anymore, they've sort of altered and adjusted you to the point where you have personally taken that stuff on yourself? Or we just think about our memories and our feelings and our emotions that work in certain ways at in certain times, and maybe are the consequence of impressions that have been left in the past.
Also, you know, the world flesh the devil. The world would be, it's my father's world, but it's really him who's got this place here. The devil.
Right.
Throwing stuff
So
out.
all the
So
things that we
he
see
said
and feel around us.
that-
Sure.
That move, you know, governmental systems or cultures.
Right. So remember that lead us not into temptation is not God stop tempting me. That is God, do you mind planting a route that avoids potholes? That would be really nice. Please. That's what lead us not into temptation means. It doesn't mean stop tempting me, God. God doesn't tempt us. But it does mean, you know, if I have to get from point A to point B, could you please take me in the route that avoids the traffic jam? Because you know where they are and I don't. And that's exactly where we are here. In the same way that we're talking about the demons love the great virtues so they can corrupt them and make terrible people. It takes great people to make them awful. This is a great line from the first Harry Potter book when the ultimate villain Voldemort actually reveals himself through someone else. But he says, there is no good and evil. There is only power and those too weak to claim it. And I remember even at the time, like, you know, the Christians who were boycotting it saying, look at what she wrote. This is so evil. Like, yeah, that's the bad guy talking. It's supposed to be evil. But think about those words. The bad guy says there is no good or evil. There is only power and those too weak to claim it. That guy was described early on in the book as great. Ollivander, the wand maker who made a wand decades ago for this young man who would become the Dark Lord Voldemort, said he did great deeds. Terrible, yes, but great. And that great doesn't mean good. Great just means kind of amazing. So the demons would love to turn big personalities into big bad personalities, big courage into big bad courage, all these sorts of things. But the opposite is also working against them too. In moments of greatest terror, sometimes we are pulled closest. You know, the no atheists in foxholes sentiment. Sometimes it is the greatest challenges that produce the greatest saints. A life of ease and comfort rarely results in saintliness. I guess it can, but again,
Doesn't result.
ease and comfort rarely results in saintliness. Again, read the spiritual autobiographies of some of these famous saints. Talk to people who you can kind of feel, you can feel the saintliness radiate off of them, and they will talk about troubles and turmoil. We watched Father Stu last night. Mark Wahlberg made a movie about he was a boxer and a failed actor, and he became this, felt called to the priesthood because he was basically chasing a woman who was a faithful Catholic, and he was willing to get baptized just because he thought he could get her. He didn't believe in this nonsense, but then God works on this guy. He actually becomes a priest. But even his life after his conversion is filled with just ridiculous downturns that would give anyone reason to despair. But eventually he comes around to a gratitude for what anyone else would see as a curse, to say, this drew me to God. And it also, the suffering that I bear in my own body draws me closer to the suffering of Christ. And it also helps me relate to other people, and other people hear what I say with like an authenticity. When this guy goes into prison and preaches to the prisoners, he preaches as somebody who has been behind bars. When he says stuff to them really straight and really kind of hard-edged, and there he is with his own body broken, but still there, it doesn't sound to them like the other priest who comes across as saying nice things, but they're all very empty because there's no real experience behind it. There's a bloodless life to the ease that even this guy, who in these terrible moments benefits from the terror and the destruction and the pain, because they are drawing him closer to the presence of God. That being back, sitting at his breakfast table, annoyed at his mother, as we were in the first couple of letters, would have never accomplished. So there's this double-edged sword. There, in every way, hell is going to keep playing this game because they can't help themselves. They're so hungry and they have to keep consuming. But there is very much a heads I win, tails you lose, because everything that they try to do always runs the risk of allowing God's grace to pull that person back to him. Because remember, there's nothing that they can do. They can't create, they can't control, they can't provide, they can only twist and corrupt and break. But even the turmoil of doing that is taking something that was given and good and bringing that to light. And even that process of bringing it to light may be just enough for the person to be drawn back to the giver of that good gift.
A few minutes ago, you were talking about feeling a nudge to do something that you shouldn't do.
Yes.
I think you can also feel a nudge to do something that, yes, you should do.
Okay.
And you can run from either one.
You most certainly can. You most certainly can. So Paul refers to our conscience as a vestige of the natural law that is formulated within us. That's why all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, whether you've heard the gospel or not, because he says that all of us have had some sort of basic awareness of the law that governs the universe. There is that's what natural law is, that it operates as our conscience, and every person has violated their conscience at some way and in some level, regardless of your particular culture. And that conscience, in many ways, are the echoes of how God has made us and made this world that should be pulling us towards him. Whether we listen to it or not, again, that's, you know. All right, so what else? We've hit our last letter. Our patient is dead, but our patient now lives, and lives more fully than ever before, and lives eternally in joy. This is the difference between the church militant, fighting, scrapping, pushing through in this world and its ups and downs and twists and turns, and the church what? Triumphant. Triumphant, for the victory is Christ's. And now, in his death, in this man's death, he shares in that victory. And even the demons see not just the presence of God that blows them away, they see the transformation of this man into a being that is now far surpassing them. Remember, they've seen us as like slugs and worms and monkeys and all this kind of jazz, but now the true purpose of humanity is revealed in this man's ultimate redemption and the beatific vision. And what this man is supposed to be finally is enough to blow these demons away. Remember, we were made a little lower than the angels for a little while, but that's not our ultimate destiny. There is a beautiful and terrible sense to all of these last couple of chapters, which is partly why I wanted to put them together, but also because I didn't want to have just one chapter kind of lingering over like an appendix. But you know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody's in a hurry to die, kind of phrase. This is when it is out of this man's hands. He is not taking every medicine, hooked up to every machine, trying to squeeze every last moment out of an exhausted life. This is a man who has been, we might say, in his prime, perhaps, or even prior to his prime, depending on how you want to describe that. And what might seem like a waste in a mortal life, let's say this guy's like 24. Let's guess 22. We might see, hear about a 22-year-old who died and think, what a waste.
The potential.
But the demons have now seen. The waste is on their end. What they have wasted time and effort and energy to a futile and fruitless pursuit, because this life that ended in a fractional sense of its mortal expectation has now met its eternal expectation, and it far outstrips. This is the eternal weight of glory that Paul writes about. That this momentary affliction will be so surpassed by the momentary affliction of our days and our years, the momentary affliction of this bombing, of the fear, the momentary affliction of whatever pain was caused in the moment of his death through an explosion or a debris or shrapnel or fire or whatever it was. And that is all consumed in the very presence of God. And now, as another Lewis writing concludes, where the last battle, the last Narnia book, and he says, now begins the title page of the great work, where every page you turn in this story is even better than the last, and there is no end. This is the consummation of God's love for us, not to be consumed and eaten, but to be fulfilled and enjoy in a way that Screwtape even says, the patient recognized the face of God and those who came with him as though he had been waiting for him all his life. this is, maybe a moment of seeing those who have died and gone on before who are there to welcome you. It is very much in my mind the words of Job. I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And in my body I shall see God. With my eyes I will behold him who is my friend and not a stranger. In the terrible mortal conclusion of his life, he was then finally introduced face to face with someone who always has been, but is recognized now as his friend. And now the great story can truly begin, and every page will only be better than the last. Anything else? Right. Well,
But it's not 100%. I mean, we know that they succeed with the demons at taking many the other way.
so thank you guys for going through all these. It's a fun book. It's a very interesting book. There's a lot of depth to it if you'll ponder it, but just the creativity, the cleverness, the little, backwards twist, and it's just a neat, it's a neat book in many ways. I know it's not always easy. And, we started this book weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and I had to give that kind of long warning and explanation. And we've all seen why, but there have been plenty of opportunities for us to kind of feel like the backwards nature can be kind of tricky, but hopefully we see in the end how full circle we have come, and just how beautiful and joyful, though the demons despair, their despair is our hope, for it's the gift, and it's the eternal grace of Christ.
Thank you. I've gone through this several times, and this is the best time.
I'm so glad. All right.
Have you